Title: A Cockroach's Gambit, The Game Theory of Manufactured Revolts and Asymmetric Warfare. A Cockroach's Gambit, The Game Theory of Manufactured Revolts and Asymmetric Warfare. If you want to understand the modern color revolution, stop looking for tanks and start analyzing the payload of the algorithm. In our previous analysis, The Three-Body Trap, we applied formal game theory to the strategic paradoxes of multipolar deterrence. We argued that stable equilibrium in a tripolar system depends entirely on information symmetry and predictable cost imposition. When the rules of the game are transparent, rational actors naturally default to deterrence rather than brinkmanship. However, a far more insidious dynamic emerges when an external or asymmetric actor realizes they cannot win the primary macro game, e.g., bilateral trade standoffs, geopolitical autonomy or tariff disputes. When direct pressure fails, the strategic play shifts to domestic exploitation warfare, opening a chaotic secondary internal front to drain the target state's operational bandwidth. Today, across the streets of New Delhi and the algorithmic corridors of social media, we are witnessing this play in real time. What began as a genuine administrative breakdown over the NEET UG paper leaks has rapidly mutated into the Cockroach Janta Party, CJP, a hyper-engineered memetic movement that bears every structural signature of a classic color revolution exploit. To understand what is happening, we must move past emotional headlines and map the payoff metrics of a cockroach's gambit eye, the anomaly, AstroTurfing and synthetic critical mass. In game theory, a coordination game requires players to believe that a critical mass of others is already committed before they will accept the individual risk of joining a protest. In traditional political history, e.g., the 2011 India Against Corruption movement, building this critical mass took months of ground-level fasting, village-to-village outreach, and sustained televised coverage. The Cockroach Janta Party, founded by digital strategist Abhijit Dipke, shattered this timeline. Within weeks of the Chief Justice of India's ill-advised courtroom remark comparing agitators to parasites, CJP transformed from an anonymous digital handle into a movement claiming tens of millions of online followers and marching on parliament. When data analysts audited the digital footprint behind this surge, the markers of AstroTurfing, manufactured grassroots, were undeniable. Step function growth. Rather than an organic bell curve, follower counts experienced vertical, non-linear cliffs. Geographic discrepancies. Massive clusters of automated engagement originated from IP ranges and server farms in Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and proxy nodes in North America. Algorithmic tricking. By dumping synthetic engagement onto target handles, the operators tricked social media recommendation engines into pushing CJP content onto the feeds of millions of actual, frustrated NEET aspirants, converting synthetic momentum into real-world street participation. 2. The institutional shield, soft power infrastructure. The operational blueprint of CJP relies on placing a celebrated moral figure at its center, Sonam Wangchuk. To evaluate Wangchuk's role objectively, one must separate his genuine grassroots accomplishments from his function in state security mechanics. The three-tiered trajectory of leadership. 1. The technical legacy. His educational reforms via SecMol, boosting Ladakhi Class 10 pass rates from 5% to 75%. Passive solar mud architecture and vertical ice to pass represent genuine localized engineering solutions. 2. The pop culture translation. The character of Funsuk Wangdu in Three Idiots, 2009, catapulted him into national stardom, while his articulate, global-facing language won him international honors like the Rolex Award 2016 and the Ramon Magsaysay Award 2018. 3. The political pivot. Following the 2019 reorganization of Jammu and Kashmir, Wangchuk shifted from technical solutions to high-stakes political mobilization, demanding 6th Schedule constitutional protections and full statehood for Ladakh. The Magsaysay architecture and credibility laundering. Wangchuk's reliance on the Ramon Magsaysay Award highlights a recurring structural pattern in South Asian civic movements. Established in 1957 with seed funding from New York's Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and later expanded via grants from the Ford Foundation. The award was designed during the Cold War as part of Western soft power architecture. In intelligence tradecraft, such honors often function as credibility laundering mechanisms. by conferring global prestige onto domestic figures. As seen previously with Arvind Kejriwal in 2006 during the Right to Information movement prior to ISE, international institutions build a roster of pre-validated civic leaders. When these figures launch hunger strikes at Jantar Mantar, they create an immediate security dilemma for the state. If the state ignores the strike, the activists' health risk creates a martyr, driving emotional citizens onto the streets. If the state intervenes, hospitalizes them, the action is packaged as authoritarian suppression by foreign media, imposing severe diplomatic costs on the government. Crucially, this dynamic does not require the activist to be a conscious foreign agent. By acting as an unyielding, hypervisible moral force, the classic useful idiot, the figure's genuine local crusade is seamlessly appropriated and amplified by external actors seeking to impose costs on the state. 2. The Playbook, Weaponized Satire and Meme Warfare. Beyond the moral shield, CJP's tactical execution borrows directly from modern Gene-sharp civil disobedience handbooks. Inverting the insult, reclaiming the CJ's parasite's remark, by wearing cockroach costumes and adopting satirical branding, lowers the political entry barrier for students. Raising suppression costs. If police forces use tear gas or water cannons against citizens dressed as insects, the state appears both brutal and absurd on global television broadcasts, weakening its domestic legitimacy. IV. The multi-front metrics stakeholder incentives. In a multiplayer game, chaos produces tangible strategic yield for specific stakeholders. Geopolitical friction forces the Indian state to divert intelligence and administrative focus away from trade standoffs and border security. V. Geopolitical convergence, the trade standoff connection. The timing of a cockroach's gambit cannot be analyzed in isolation. It coincides directly with heightened international trade friction, where India has firmly resisted external tariff demands and unilateral economic pressure. When a sovereign state asserts its economic autonomy on the global stage, foreign counter-negotiators face an operational problem. How do you break a stubborn government's resolve without direct confrontation? The answer lies in asymmetric cost imposition. By fueling an internal fire, whether through Shaheen Bagh, the farmers, protests, or now the NEET CJP agitation, external actors force the target government to spend the majority of its administrative bandwidth managing street fires. The international narrative instantly shifts from India asserts economic sovereignty to India faces severe internal instability and democratic crisis. Why? Counter strategy. Changing the payoff matrix. To break out of this decision loop, the Indian state cannot rely solely on traditional riot control or defensive press briefings. Winning an asymmetric game requires changing the payoff matrix across three distinct operational pillars. A. Administrative, depriving the gambit of fuel. The most effective way to collapse a manufactured revolt is to eliminate its organic core. Rigorous statutory enforcement. Full application of the Public Examinations Prevention of Unfair Means Act, 2024, targeting paper leak syndicates and compromised service providers with non-bailable imprisonment up to 10 years and 1 crore rupees fines, while explicitly safeguarding innocent candidates. Systemic NTA reform. Accelerated implementation of the Dr. K. Radhakrishnan Committee recommendations, transitioning high-stakes tests from vulnerable single-day pen and paper formats toward hybrid, encrypted computer-based testing, CBT architectures. B. Counter-information. Exposing the mechanics. Rather than engaging in a defensive meme battle, the state must expose the synthetic mechanics behind the movement. Declassifying botnet telemetry. Publicly releasing OSINT data and cyber forensic traces of automated click farms operating from proxy hubs in Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and North America. Exposing the inorganic nature of the digital surge instantly erodes the movement's moral legitimacy among genuine students. Financial auditing, enforcing strict FCRA compliance and tracing digital payment pipelines linked to AstroTurfing consultancies to expose the money trail behind the escalation. C. Geopolitical decoupling. Signal and resolve. To disincentivize foreign interference during trade standoffs, the state must signal total inflexibility under internal duress. Zero diplomatic yield. Explicitly communicating through diplomatic channels that internal civic disruptions will yield zero leverage in bilateral trade or tariff negotiations. Cognitive defense infrastructure. establishing dedicated hybrid warfare detection units within national security apparatuses to identify and neutralize AstroTurfed coordination games before they achieve street-level critical mass. Conclusion: patching the administrative code. A Cockroach's Gambit succeeds because the underlying vulnerability, the neat paper leaks, institutional failures, and youth employment anxieties, is entirely real. External actors and domestic strategists do not need to invent the rage, they merely write the exploit code to run against an unpatched administrative bug. For the state, resolving this crisis cannot be achieved solely through police barricades or detentions, as those actions fulfill the opponent's strategy. The only effective counter-Gambit is to patch the core system code, restoring absolute integrity to national examinations, enforcing strict statutory penalties against paper leak syndicates, and maintaining transparent communication with the youth demographic. When the core grievance is resolved, the bot farms lose their narrative traction, the useful idiot moral shields collapse, and the Gambit exhausts its available moves. Note: editorial illustrations throughout this document were generated using AI, created as a stylistic tribute to the work of R.K. Laxman, whose cartoons were an integral part of this author's life growing up in 1980s India.